All right, and I apologize if you can hear the garage door opening right below me because my wife has to go out and run some errands, but here we are. Happy Wednesday, September 29th. Welcome to the Kansas City User Group, still virtual. Thank you for joining us. It's been 6 or 7 weeks since our last meeting. I am Dale Ziegler by day. I am a senior business analyst with 7 Summits, an IBM company. And Jeff, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Berger. I'm VP, Director of Salesforce Operations here at Academy Bank, AKA Armed Forces Bank, AKA Dickinson Financial Corporation in downtown Kansas City.
Fantastic, thank you. You can reach either of us at that email address down at the bottom. It auto forwards to both of us. If you have any questions, comments, you want to present at a future meeting, if anything that you need, we're both fairly responsive on it. So don't be afraid to reach out. As we started with, we are recording this. So if you're not allowed to, or you're not comfortable being recorded, please go ahead and drop, but we will be posting this to our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the day today. If not tonight, tomorrow morning. We're also going to share our deck, and then any content that our speakers are willing to share, we'll get all of those shared out as well. Okay. So you won't miss anything. Actually, that's a great segue into our next slide. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself. I was not able to get to the mute all function in time, but also the other thing that we've had to call out a few times, we're still in a Zoom world. We're trying to get back to normal. Things are still virtual. Zoom accounts are getting shared. We just ask that please check your name in the participant list and that it is actually yours. We have actually had a few instances where like RoboGamer123 joined the call, and then it was like, no, really, who are you? This is a professional networking call. Oh, hey, sorry, this is so-and-so. My kid must have hijacked my Zoom account. Oh, got it. That happens a lot. We just ask, give us your real name so that we know who's on the call, and if you speak up later, we know who's talking. I'm sure RoboGamer123 is an awesome individual, but I bet RoboGamer123 and their persona is not actually on this call. Thank you to our sponsors, the Eagan brothers, David and Mike from DataParrot, who actually born and raised in Lawrence, so not too far from us. I was already planning to wear my Jayhawk shirt anyway, but especially in honor of them, Rock Chalk, and sure, we like K-State as well, but very, very happy to have a local sponsor in the Salesforce community joining us today and presenting on a couple of awesome products that they already have out and that they're working on as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And we'll be raffling off a couple of gift cards a little bit later here in the session. We do have a Slack channel. We say this every meeting. We'd like to get a little bit more traffic on it, but we do have the Slack channel. If you would like to be part of it, send us an email to, again, the same Kansas City US user email address. We'll get you added as quickly as possible. For those of you who have never joined us at a user group meeting before, what is the Salesforce community? Like, if you're new to the community as a whole. So we actually have a handful of groups here in the Kansas City Metro. This meeting is the user group in general. So come one, come all, doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, if you're a developer, if you're in the marketing space, if you're WIT, if you're an admin, whatever. This is a place for everybody because we do tend to have a lot of cross-functional conversation and idea sharing. But just know that there are other groups here locally to join as well. And so again, after we share the deck later this evening, you can go to that bit.ly and that'll redirect you to the community site as a whole. That will get you more information on how to join the other groups. So upcoming here locally, our next meeting will be November 9th, and I'm actually going to work on posting the registration site later this week. Working on some final logistical items. We've been using the Zoom account that we're on right now is mine with 7 Summits, but with 7 Summits having been acquired by IBM earlier this year, we are switching to WebEx at the 1st of November. So I need to run some tests on WebEx before we can then say, all right, here's the meeting link. So we'll get that out as soon as we can, but November 9th will be Capstorm. and Rebecca Gray, who is the St. Louis user group leader, she'll be presenting. And I did not add that Todd actually will be presenting as well on his experiences with MFA, SSO, ABC, QRS, and a few other acronyms that are very prevalent in the Salesforce ecosystem. So as soon as that registration site is out and up, please join us. And then if you have a topic that you would love to present on, please go to that speaker interest form. We're always looking for willing and able presenters. The scope of what you present on is completely up to you. It doesn't matter if it's your org's use case, if it's something that you've taken a personal dev org and made it your own to track something in life using Salesforce, if it's something from the release notes, or you're a Flownatic, or reporting snapshots, the unforgotten best friend, whatever. We want to hear from you. So go to that speaker interest form. So do we have any other group leaders from Kansas City, or any other group leaders from around the country and around the world on the call that want to introduce themselves? Don't be shy. I don't have the chat up to see if anybody's putting anything in there. All right.
Not yet.
Not yet, yes. Do we have anybody from outside of Kansas City in general that has joined us today?
Me.
Hi, Christy.
Hi.
Always lovely to have you. I see Marty. I see
Matt Bender out of Indianapolis.
Mr. Bender. Welcome.
Howdy.
Welcome. Pleasure to be here. It's a great group.
Yeah. Well, and from KC-based DEG, so you're local. You may not be local, but you're local.
I'm learning the streets and the barbecue.
Yes.
That's what's important.
Switch your order. Learn the barbecue before you learn the streets. That's how you'll survive here.
I see in the chat we've got Brandon from Indianapolis as well. Hi, Brandon. And I think I've asked this before. Lana or Lana from DC. Welcome. Apologies. I should have remembered from last time.
I will say, though, our farthest virtual traveler is actually one of our sponsors. David Eagan is in London. I hear that's a popular city in the United Kingdom.
Yes. Big city right in the lower middle.
Very nice. I'm gonna butcher this, but Chatoye in Northern Virginia. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. Awesome. That's the beauty of these virtual events. I know we want to try to be getting back to in person, but things are still so much in the air and so many things to consider. But the beauty of virtual is that it does open things up for us to bring in anyone and everyone from around the country and around the world. So try to find the silver lining in things, make the best of what we have. And so it's awesome to not just have Kansas City and the immediate Midwest here. So thank you everybody for joining. We love having you here. Do we have any Salesforce employees on the call? Okay. Nope, but that's okay. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna stop emailing them every single time to say, hey, you guys can come. All right, do we have any first-time attendees?
I don't have Hannah.
All right.
If I didn't know if that counted as a first-time attendee.
Potentially, yeah. It counts. Okay. So now the really fun stuff. So do we have any new roles or jobs or job openings to share? We got a quiet
This
bunch
is not explicitly a new role, but I did just want to call out one thing that one session that I attended at Dreamforce was about the new designer role, and this is something that's very new. Salesforce has an internal design UI UX team, and they've really been pushing Salesforce internally to put more of an emphasis on UI and UX design in the community. And so they're actually in the process of developing content and ultimately certifications for UI UX designers. And so not a specific new role or anything yet, but I just wanted to call that out, that there's sort of a new role being birthed in the community that folks might want to be aware of. So just know that that's coming at some point in the future, safe harbor. If you know people who are in that world, who maybe are looking for an in for Salesforce, that might be something that's getting more attention in the near future.
Absolutely. And then complementing that, there's been a massive explosion of the number of people obtaining the user experience design certification. I can at least speak from the 7 Summit side. I would say we have at least 1 or 2 from every competency of our company, whether it's administrators and BAs, whether it's tech leads, whether it's our project managers. It's a human-centric certification. So thinking about what should this look like? And so it's easy for all of us to put our everyday consumer, everyday user hats on and really think about, okay, how should this be designed? It's not entirely technical. So definitely something to be on the lookout for if you're looking for a next certification. Definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think to hear the Salesforce team talk about it, their sort of like ideal state or ideal vision, right, is that your UI UX designer would be, at the table every step of the way, sort of hand in hand with the business analyst, and in every one of those meetings, doing a different sort of translation, right, of requirements, and really should be involved before you get to requirement grooming, before you even, put pen to paper with your initial development. So, I thought that was interesting. More discussion to come there, I'm sure, but definitely want to echo what Dale said. And it's a hot topic and a hot cert right now.
Absolutely. Alex, we saw you in the chat. Congratulations. New role, Enterprise Sales Director at Screen Meet, Alex Montero. And we did also get your speaker interest form entry. So we'll reach out to you here in the next week or 2. Thank you, sir, and congratulations. Daniel Malone, Mr. Pay It Forward, started his own LLC so he can take on 1099 and B2B opportunities. So Daniel, if there's any information, any contact information you want to share with us, either in the chat or one-on-one, we can share that out with the rest of the group so that people can get in touch with you. So that's awesome. Congratulations on that venture. Cindy says, started at Bardavon Health Innovations as an admin and just passed the platform app builder certification. Fantastic. Love it. Kelly Wilson, first time attendee. Welcome. Love to have you. New role as the only CRM admin at BGRS, both the admin and advanced admin certs. Advanced admin, that's a big one. Working on platform dev. Awesome. Really looking forward to being a member of this group. We're looking forward to having you as a member of this group.
Hey, Kelly, pro tip, if you, now that you've passed advanced admin, if you want a cheap 3rd certification, check out the Sales Cloud Consultant exam, because if you can pass advanced admin, you can pass Sales Cloud Consultant.
Yep. Bingo.
Funny you say that, because I took the Service Cloud and failed it the first time, so I'm still studying that one. But Sales Cloud Consultant, you think I can pass? I'll try it.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of crossover between the Sales Cloud. There's a lot of emphasis on like products and price books and things like that in both exams. So at least in my experience, it was helpful.
I'll second that. Yep.
Thank you so much for the tip. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And Service Cloud took me 3 tries before I got it. Not gonna lie, I'll be perfectly honest, but that's why we asked that question right there.
Exactly.
Saurabh, welcome, first time attendee, senior developer, and again, I'm going to butcher this, Chatoyer, working on Tableau CRM and Einstein Discovery Consultant. Those are definitely big ones. Hitting the help documents to get better understanding. Attended implement and manage Tableau CRM course. That's only a fraction of the exam. Tried before, hopefully we'll pass the second time. Good luck. If I may actually have somebody that I work with that you might be able to work with, or maybe maybe this person was in the same class as you this week. So I can put you in touch with someone if you would like to perhaps study group with.
Hey, Gaurav, are you, welcome. Are you, if you feel comfortable sharing, are you local to Kansas City or are you dialing in from somewhere else? I'm just curious to know. While we're waiting on that answer, Brandy posted in the chat a link to the Torrent Consulting Careers. So do check that out if you're looking for a new opportunity.
Awesome. And like I said, we'll be sharing these links out after the meeting, so that if anybody's looking, we can get connected that way. Any other certification updates? And you all know my favorite thing actually is hearing about who took and failed, because every failed exam is an opportunity to pass again. Any other certification updates or study groups that are getting started? I'm on the books for user experience design next Friday, so we'll see.
Awesome. Way to put it on the books.
Yeah, the virtual books. Called the
Yeah, you got to put it on the books or else it never happens, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, fantastic. So we'll roll through the rest of these really quick because we're already at 20 after, and I said I was gonna make it short. Community resources this Friday, MVP office hours. Myself, Joy Shutters Helbing in Chicago, and Squire Kirshner in Milwaukee. We lead a call twice a month to bring any and all of your questions and perspectives, whatever. If you have an immediate issue that you just you can't troubleshoot, you can't bug solve, whatever, come to the call. We'll do our best to get you taken care of right there and in person. So go ahead and check out those links and get registered. We'd love to have you. We have a pretty strong Kansas City contingency every time, so definitely love that. World tours and other Salesforce events. I think they're going to take a breather for a little bit after this thing called Dreamforce last week that I'll be honest, I did not see it actually coming to fruition. So I gotta give all the applause in the world to it happening. Trailhead Live and webinars. The beautiful part about those links is it's not just upcoming live events, but recordings as well. If you missed the live ones, and some a really good filter and search engine. So if you're looking for a specific topic on whether it's flow or Pardot, whatever, definitely go hit up those links. Community events, those they're a little bit slower just because of COVID and the ability to actually meet in person, but there are still virtual events going on, so go check those out. Those next two with the asterisks. Danielle Karendian is the main point of contact from Salesforce on the success community for the prep weeks, which they can be 1 or 2 day seminars, they can be full week classes, whatever. But then in the end, you get some discounts on actually taking certification exams. So go check out those couple of links there. Trailblazer mentorship. I'm going to talk about this one all day, every day, having been a mentor. It's a great program. You get lined up, whether you're a mentor or a mentee. You do get your skill sets aligned, other demographics, gender, race, location, age. They do take all of those into consideration to try to forge the best relationship possible so that everybody can grow. If you've been mentored by somebody and you want to give back, go be a mentor. If you are just getting started in Salesforce and want someone who can help guide you, sign up to be a mentee. I 100% recommend it. And the idea exchange prioritization, I think the window is closed right now, but definitely follow that link to get updates on when they reopen, and you can help shape the roadmap. Certification days specifically, you can see all those dates, and we have the links in there. There are a few courses coming up here in the month of October, so definitely go check those out. There's also a link down there for anybody who is going to be prepping for the administrator certification. There's some additional resources behind that link down at the very bottom, so definitely check those out. Winter 22, pretty much, well, not everybody's on production yet, but will be in the next couple of weeks. So a lot of these are more like, okay, here's what's already happened in terms of what's been released in sandboxes and all of that, but go follow the release readiness trailblazers group. If you haven't already, set it to daily, because there's not too many posts per day, but I think you might be a few days behind if you're at weekly. The release notes, feature matrix, videos, the release in a box, all of those are phenomenal resources. Some of them are even in formats like Google Slides, that you can take those slides and make your own presentations for your company if you need to, of here's what's coming up in this latest release. A lot of great resources there to get you up to speed on winter 22. Finally, I need to update that to 22, but certification maintenance exam deadlines. We are past the August deadline for Heroku, Pardot, and B2B, but coming up in December, and I'm particularly going to highlight these two in the middle because we probably have quite a few attendees with either of those. To my knowledge, the exact date has not been announced yet, but just go do it now. Don't lose your certifications just because you didn't take the maintenance. Go do it as soon as you can, because Platform App Builder and PD1 will be up in December, and then we come back around to admin and some of the other ones in April. So today's agenda, again, as I mentioned, local company DataParrot. Mike Eagan will be presenting on Sandbox Data Management with DataParrot and showing off a couple of awesome products that they have. And then Mike Troy, if you've seen me on MVP office hours and some of the other calls here, I am so excited for Mike to show us what he's doing with Workbench. It's the tool that I hope never actually goes away, because it's a Swiss Army knife. It does so many things. Admins, definitely pay attention to what Mike Troy is doing with Workbench, because it's going to be super duper fantastic. So with that, Mike Eagan, are you ready to go and for me to hand over the reins?
Unmute, see if I can, how's that looking? Can you guys see my screen?
We see production data for Sandbox.
All right, there we go. So I'm going to flip over to the deck. We'll get started here. I guess let me do a quick introduction myself, and then we can do an introduction of David. Obviously, as you mentioned, we're brothers. We grew up in Lawrence. I started my career 20 plus years ago on enterprise requirements planning software. So I was doing on-premises software for ERP for many, many years. And at one point about 7 years ago, we were doing a big data migration. The Salesforce team got a little bit behind, and I had the opportunity to start working with them to try to make up some time and get to our cutover. And I absolutely love the product. It was fantastic. It was so much better than the old school ERP that I was dealing with. And so I switched, and I consulted on Salesforce for several years. Because of my ERP background, I was used to this environment where if it used to a work environment where if we needed another environment, like an integration environment or a test environment, we just stood up some more hardware and restored it back up, and boom, we're ready to go. And so the problem that I saw with Salesforce was you've got a lot of sandboxes that come with all the metadata, they come with the user records, maybe products, some other things. But if you were going to spin up a new sandbox and start developing against, say, a managed package for an implementation or developing new features, there was no data. And so you have to manually make that data yourself. As a consultant at a fairly big company, nobody wanted to do that job. And it was this long spreadsheet of checklist of here's how we refresh a sandbox, and that rolled down to me because I was the low man on the totem pole as the outside consultant. And I said, you know what, metadata is a great thing. There's got to be a better way to do that. And so that was kind of the impetus to make DataParrot. So David, you want to give a quick introduction for you and take it away?
Yep, thank you. Dave Eagan, longtime software consultant, spent a lot of years implementing CRM systems and doing large-scale data migrations for both CRMs and ERPs. I've been a heavy Salesforce user for over 10 years now. I implemented Lightning just a couple of years ago, and I've also implemented Financial Force PSA and Kimball PSA. So Salesforce is in my DNA as well, and that's why I joined Mike on this pursuit. So we just a few intro slides, and then I'll hand over to Mike for the more in-depth demo. Essentially, what is DataParrot? DataParrot enables users and admins to build and copy data sets from any source to any target within a production Salesforce organization And the important point is while maintaining all of those parent-child relationships up and down the hierarchy. Some of the key use cases that we've seen emerge around accelerating continuous development integration, like Mike just talked about, which was kind of the primary use case that spurned the idea. Compressing your standardized QA cycles, assisting with ISV managed package implementations. Personally, I experienced that with a Kimball implementation where we did not have access to a full sandbox, driving user adoption, doing targeted object and field masking, and then ultimately you could be used as sandbox management as a service. Won't go through all the detail because Mike will show you, but this is just kind of a functional overview of what DataParrot offers, discovering sandboxes, building data sets, including or excluding objects as a part of that query, masking sensitive data, viewing the real-time API and storage limits, and then ultimately when you're moving that data into the target environment, disabling all the triggers, workflows, flows, validation rules, because those would have already fired in the source. And I will hand over to Mike.
All right, so I'm going to do a quick overview of the architecture, let you know where things are sitting in DataParrot. We'll start into the demo. Please, if you have questions, don't hesitate to jump in and interrupt. I love talking about the product. I'm really excited about it. And if you see something and you have a question about it, definitely just jump in right away and let me know. So Salesforce, DataParrot is a managed package. You get it on the App Exchange. It runs in the Salesforce cloud. A couple of years ago, it was a little more important to stress this. I think now most people have Lightning enabled. DataParrot is only built on Lightning components. There are no Visualforce pages. So at a minimum, you have to have Lightning enabled for your admins who are going to use the product. And you install it in your production organization. That'll become clear. The reason for that will become clear later on when we start to work from the demo. But when you install it in production, now you have access to discover all the sandboxes that are underneath production and move data around. The back end of DataParrot runs on AWS. We use a handful of services. The most important is EC2 instances, and all the data that we consume is stored in a Postgres database. And usually our concerns from customers is what data do you have and what data are you storing? And so this is kind of a short list of what we do. When we connect to an organization, we do a describe schema, and then we do a describe object on every object in the schema. And that allows us to understand, that's basically a metadata retrieval. And that allows us to understand all of the objects in the schema and the relationships between those objects. We do we store the identity data for the users, which are admin users, and the identity data URL is really helpful. I don't know if anybody's used it, but basically it's login.salesforce.com/ID/ and then the organization ID and the user ID. And that will give you everything, all the information about that user. And for us, what we're concerned with is the role, the profile, and permission sets, that sort of thing. We store operational data, and this is the data that DataParrot generates while it's building data sets. For example, when we're building a data set, we need to store the IDs of the records that are in that data set. We need to store a log of the operations that happen while we're building that data set or while we're copying it. We do use the OAuth 2 process. We use the web server flow, and we'll walk you through that. So we store authentication tokens they are encrypted at rest. All of the services, all of the communication transport between the Salesforce cloud and DataParrot is all encrypted. We do store OAuth session and refresh tokens. They're encrypted at rest. Also application logs, I think I mentioned that. So now I think we'll go ahead and get straight into a demo. So we're going to show you how to connect an organization, how to create a data set using a point and click query builder. We'll look at a couple of configuration options, and the first one is object scope, which is really allows you to control the size of the data set you're building. And the feature that we have with all of these interrelated tables is when you start at a point, it's pretty easy to go up and down the relationship tree and pull in tons and tons and tons of records. That may not be your goal. You're really looking for some targeted data to either develop against or test against. Field masking is also very important. We allow you to, as we're copying data from one org to the other, we can put a mask over that field or obfuscate the value. So There's a lot of obvious cases, whether it's protected information, social security numbers, names, if you're even opportunity amounts could be considered competitive sales information, and you don't want to put that in a sandbox where you've either got employees who normally wouldn't have access to that information, or maybe you're dealing with some offshore resources. We'll show the copy data set to organization and look at the results. So let's flip over to here. So this is what DataParrot looks like when it's not sure what happened there. This is what DataParrot looks like when it's installed in your production org. So in this case, when you first install it, it's not connected to any orgs. And when we say connected, what we're doing is creating an OAuth connection so that our backend servers on AWS can use the API to manipulate data, to read and understand data. So in this case, we've connected production, and it has auto-discovered the sandboxes under this. This is a partner enterprise org, so it's not a big org. It's not got a lot of data. I've got 3 sandboxes here. Once we connect, you can see some detailed information about that org, who we're connected as, what the my URL is, the org ID, some OAuth information in terms of when did we first connect, how many times have we refreshed our OAuth connection in the background. We've also got limits information. So this is important when you're moving data around. You want to know what your API is that's available and what file storage is available. And so on the API, our source org, that's where we're going to be using the API to query the source org to get the data. We're using the API to put the data into the target org, and then we're also concerned with storage on the target. So in this case, here's a dev sandbox. You can see we've got 200 megs of space and it's all available. There's no data in there right now. Once we've got an org connected, we've got a couple of options. We can either disconnect that org, which means forget my OAuth login information. We can refresh the metadata manually. So let's say there was a deployment up to production. We have some changes there. We can manually go refresh the metadata, or DataParrot automatically, every time it runs a job, which is to build a data set or copy data from one org to another, we refresh that metadata for those orgs just to make sure we always have the most current snapshot. You can also delete all info. And the great thing about deleting all info on production, as a developer, as somebody that I'm really concerned about the privacy of this product, when you do this on your production organization, DataParrot is going to forget absolutely everything that we know about whatever orgs have been connected. We're going to delete all the data, all the logs, everything, and put it back to the state it was before it was installed. And so this is not a bad thing to do as a user. If you just want to reset, you can do this, and then you can reconnect your production, reconnect your sandboxes, and move on and start building data sets. But this is an easy way for an administrator. If we're not using this product right now, or if we're not going to continue to use it, we can delete everything. If we're just concerned about the amount of data that's out there, we can do this at any time. So let's go ahead and connect, show you how to connect an org. Now we're going to connect our QA org. Because we know a lot about these sandboxes, we know what the login URL is. We have a pretty good guess as to what my user ID is going to be, since I'm the user that's connecting here. So we click login and we get the OAuth flow connection. There's a lot of permissions that are available on OAuth. We're really just looking for 3. The main is we need read and write all data, and we need to be able to perform requests on your behalf at any time. What that means is when you do this OAuth connection right now, we're going to get a session token that's good for 2 hours or whatever your timeout limits are for your org. We're also going to get a refresh token. So if you come back tomorrow or next week, we're going to refresh that session token in the background. You don't have to continue to log into these orgs. So I'm going to go ahead and click allow. This is going to bring us back to DataParrot. And now you can see that our QA environment is connected. We've got our first refresh. We've got limits here. And in the background, we've started a job. And this is the metadata refresh. And so we're consuming the metadata for this org to understand the relationships between those objects, because it more than likely is going to be different than some of our other sandboxes or even production. So that job's run now. This is kind of an overview of all of our organizations. Now let's go look at how to build a data set, and then we'll look at some of the configuration options, and then at how the copy actually works. So as a developer, the reason I built this product was, let's say I'm responsible for a new flow for a case. I've got some new workflow that I need to develop against the case object. I want to be able to test this fully in my development environment before I move it up to QA, where it's going to be tested probably in a full sandbox. So the idea is let me get some real data down into my dev sandbox so I can test against that and develop against that from the very get-go. In this case, we're going to build a data set for just open cases. We'll show you how to do that. So first, you select the source organization. You can build a data set from any org that's connected. You can see right here, we've got production, dev, QA. If I had a longer list of sandboxes and if I had connected them on the orgs tab, they would show up here. So I'm going to choose production. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to give it a description, open cases. I'm going to set the data set scope to none. We'll talk about that later. Now, we select our starting point. The way DataParrot works is we start with an initial query of a limited set of records. And from that set of records, we traverse the relationships up and down the tree to pull in all the related data. Some of that data is going to be required in order, for example, if we pull in 5 cases, we're going to have accounts and contacts in order to create those cases. But we may also have optional records that are related to the case, like case comments. And so we're going to pull those in. And so we start with a small number of records and pull in as much as we can. This list is a curated list of standard objects, plus all of the custom objects on the system. So you can see we've got a bunch of managed package objects here. I'm going to start with case. DataParrot has the metadata, so we know everything about this object. We're going to go, here's all of our fields. I'm going to say where status is not equal to close. That's going to get our open cases. I can validate this query, and this is going to send the query in real time to my production org and say, what's my expected result? So right here, I've got 3 cases. That's what I think I'm going to get back. This is the SOQL query that I used, and this is valid. You can cut and paste this into, for example, Workbench or any other tools that you're using. If we want to, let's say this organization had a whole bunch of data in it. I wanted to fine tune this a little bit more. So I could add some more criteria, and I could say where the created date was, say, less than September 29th, or you could even say September 1st, whatever. Validate. Again, there's not a lot of data in this org, so this is really just trying to show you some of the functionality. If we want to add some more complicated queries, we could do this. We could say where priority, let's do priority all 3 times. Could say priority equal to high, medium, and low. You can do an or, validate, and you can see here's the query that we're building out. And so that group didn't really affect our outcome because we selected the only 3 options that we have in that pick list, but it shows you how you can iterate through your criteria and really refine down to an initial set of records. Once we've done that, we've got a handful of levers we can use to control the size of the data set. So we have a hard limit that says, once we get to this many records, let's just stop and shut down. At that point, we will pull any missing dependencies. So let's say the data set record limit was 50 and our initial query was 50 cases. We're not going to stop when we get to those 50 cases. We're going to pull in the necessary accounts and contacts and whatever dependencies are necessary in order to create those cases. So the final record count might be higher than the hard stop limit, but that's just to include dependencies. You've got a base object record limit, and you can see this is just on my initial query right here, where I've done my initial query limit 50. So I could say, you know what, I want 500 of those, or I only want 10. We've got a relationship record limit, which says when I am looking at accounts, for example, and the contacts relationship, and I find records out there, how many do I want to pull in? I may have 1,000 contacts, but I only want to pull in 200 because, again, I'm trying to keep my data set kind of trim and small to work with, or I may want everything. The data set scope we're going to talk about on the configuration tab that allows you to define a specific list of objects to say only include records from these objects, or alternatively, only include data that is not in these objects. Then without a scope, it just includes all the data that it finds. Limit dependencies is another one. I'll show you when we look at the results of the data set, it's easier to understand what that means. So I've already built this data set. You can see I've got my open cases here. And if I do view details, here is the data set that I've built. At the top, it's kind of a summary of the options that we've chosen. We did not choose limit dependencies. And then here's actually the records that are in the data set. We've got some custom objects. We've got some standard objects. Some of you who are familiar with the Lightning World Tour from a couple of years ago when they were really starting to push Lightning. This is the Dreamhouse application. It was the demo application for Lightning apps. That's what our custom objects are here. See, we've got 2 accounts, 3 cases, 6 contacts. If I open those up, this is the name field from those records. So here's our cases, here's our contacts. This gives us context to know what's in the data set. So let's say I built a data definition that said, give me open data sets. And I knew that case 2501 is really the one that I am hoping to get in there. I can come in here right away and say, you know what, my query wasn't right. I didn't grab that case and make adjustments from that point. So this shows us all of the records that are in the data set. If we want to download those into Excel, we can do that. And this is really more from an audit standpoint. This is an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs. The front tab is a summary of the objects and the record counts. On the next tab, you have all of the objects and records that were included. So this column is the IDs from the source. These are the name fields. This is the object name. And this is why this record was included. And you can see right here on the case, this was from the base object query. Our initial query was give me open cases. We came up with 3. And then when we look at up here, the reason the Acme account was included because it was the account for case 1001. You can see, for example, here's a broker. This was on the broker relationship for the global media account. So this is, again, more context to let you know why the data was there. That's helpful in 2 ways. One, if it's not data you're interested in, you can exclude that object or that relationship. If it is something you want more of, then you can focus down. You can start your actually data set at that object level and build up from there. The details are further broken down by object. This is not that helpful when we're only talking about 5 or 10 records, but it does get pretty helpful when you're talking about 5 or 10,000 records.
As an aside,
yeah,
you should package and sell just that Excel exporter tool, because that was so cool. And creating all those individual tabs. You'll have to tell me how you did that. That's pretty
I'm happy to. It's, and what the thing, one of the things that always drives me nuts is I don't want to open something up in a CSV and have to resave it as Excel and all the rest of that baloney. So the goal here was to make sure that this is actually a valid Excel file, and even to the column widths and all of that kind of stuff, making sure that it's just ready to go from the moment you open it up. That was, I'm glad to hear that it's helpful, because that was as a user, I'm like, this is dumb. I don't want to have to do this every single time.
Well, look, the reality is, as much as we'd like to say that, Salesforce can kill a lot of spreadsheets, the rest of the organization still likes spreadsheets. And if you had told me years ago that as a Salesforce admin, I would be spending as much time in Excel as I do, I would have spent a little more, investment in my own Excel skills. So anyway, not to derail the conversation.
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely.
That's really cool. And creating the tab breakout and all that stuff, stuff like that should be out of the box for compliance purposes, and it's not. And so even as somebody who pays for Shield and event monitoring and all that fancy stuff, I still don't get stuff that's as cool as that. So another session sometime, maybe you can teach us how to build that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate the feedback. So let's go look. So here's the cases. This first open cases, this one was built with limit dependencies not checked. And what that meant was we pulled in these 3 cases. We pulled in the counts that are required for those cases, but then we also looked at the opportunity relationship under those accounts. So you can see how you sort of add more leaves to the tree when you don't limit dependencies. If you're looking for a very focused set of data, then limit data dependencies, and it'll only include sort of the vertical tree. As soon as you uncheck limit dependencies, it starts to add more leaves and branches to the tree. So here is the same query, but we did limit dependencies and we only came up with 11 records. And the reason is because these are the ones that were required in order to create these cases. So we had 3 cases, and in order to create those cases, we had 4 contacts. That seems a little weird until you realize that one of these contacts has a reports to relationship. So in order to create the contact on the case, we also had to include the contact of the person that was reported to. And then we've got a custom object, and this is some brokers that these brokers are on the account records. So these are the lead brokers on the account. So that gives you an idea of what limit dependencies does. If you limit dependencies, you end up with sort of a very narrow, tall tree. If you don't limit, you end up with a tree with a lot of branches and a lot of leaves. Let's go look. I'll show you the copy to org here in a minute. We'll look at the configuration options, and then we'll look at the copy to org, and then we'll actually look at the data that's run. So object scope, there's 3 ways to run a data set build. One is don't use a scope at all, include every record that you encounter in the search. Include records, say only include records for the objects in this list, and exclude says exclude records for the objects in this list, but include everything else. And so here's how we do that. We start out with a scope. We're just going to call this test. If I only wanted to include account, case, and contact, I would make sure that this was set at include. I'd set that up, and that's my scope. And if I started out with say my 3 cases, and even if I didn't say limit dependencies, so I was trying to pull in everything, we're not going to pull the opportunities under the accounts because they're not in this list, if that makes sense. So another way to do it is exclude. So let's say we want everything, but because opportunity has competitive sales information in it, we just don't want that to go down. We want to include everything else, but not these objects. If we attach this scope when we build the data set, that will define what records are included. For me, as someone who, if you work in an org with a lot of managed packages, and Salesforce actually should be very proud of the work they've done now. The statistics and the number of orgs that have managed packages and the number of orgs that if they have one, they have more like 5 or 10 is really up there. So as a developer, or as if you're bringing somebody on board to train, you may need test data, but you're not going to actually be modifying your managed package. You're going to rely on that ISV to provide you updates to that managed package. Typically, if you have one hook into a managed package object, like TaskRay, a project management system, as soon as you have one hook into it, you're going to end up pulling in a huge amount of data because TaskRay has 400 objects, right? And so so one of the things you can do is say, I want to exclude a specific managed package. And so my managed packages that are installed in this org are a couple of Salesforce lab packages. So I could say, I want to exclude all of the trail tracker package. So I do that, it automatically pulls in that list, I can save it. And now when I build a data set, I'm not going to include any of the trail tracker stuff. I can also say, you know what, just add everything. This may be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objects, but I only want data that's in my standard or my own custom objects. So I'm going to add all of the managed packages. And so you can see, here's an example of the details on excluding all managed packages. You can see here's our 100 objects in the Agile Accelerator from Salesforce Labs, and here's the trail tracker. So again, it sounds, I'm probably beating on this, but when you start querying data and relationships, it's very easy to pull in a huge amount of data, which is probably more than you're looking for. And so that's why the focus of DataParrot has been, let me give you hard limits on relationships and data and data set size. Let me also give you options on what objects to include records for. So now once we've built that data set, we can copy it to an org. So I'm going to choose our bigger one. We select our target. This is organizations that we've connected on the front tab, but not the organization that we've built it in. DataParrot was not built to build a data set and copy it back to itself in a single org. So we're going to move to dev. Now, if I had created this data set in a dev sandbox and I wanted to push it to production, then that would be an option. I could copy it up to production. So I'm going to choose dev, choose next. Now we have a summary of the data set that we're going to copy, and we have a handful of options that control how that data is copied. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot field masking. So this is an important part of copying. Let's go back to the configuration. This is field masking. This is probably one of the most important things for an admin in terms of being able to obfuscate data as you copy it down to a target environment. So I'm going to just create a test. The way you do this is add it at a field level. So if I want to mask the phone number, I could go to contact. I could say the business phone. I could just say it's always 858-555-1212. And now whatever that source phone number was in production, it's always going to look like this in the sandbox when I get copied down. The important thing is this happens in memory. So we don't copy the data to the sandbox and then go back and fix it. this is how it originally goes into the sandbox in the first copy. We can also choose to randomize it. We can add fields for any object. So let's say account, we could say, we always want these to be prospects. Doesn't matter what they are in production, we always want them to be a prospect. We could go to the opportunity object and say we want the amount to always be $25,000. And so this allows us to mask those values as we're copying in Sandbox. One of the things that as admins you probably have encountered, I know I have, when you copy live data down to a new Sandbox, especially email addresses, there's a possibility that somebody triggers, maybe me myself inadvertently triggered a process or a workflow. And now I've got 500 emails that went out from a Sandbox, they went to live customers, and now I've got to deal with that problem, and I've got to explain myself to management. So because we have the metadata, we know what all the email fields are. We can bring them into a mask. So I'm just going to click the email fields button. This has gone across all of the objects in the schema and has said, here are all of my email fields, and my default mask is going to be to invalidate every single one of them in the same way that the user table is obfuscated when we copy it, when Salesforce creates a Sandbox. So if my user email in production is mike@dataparrot.io, when I create a Sandbox, I go in there and it's mike@dataparrot.io.invalid. So we're going to apply the same masking. Now, go back to our original test case. I'm building a flow against the case object. I'm copying data down into the Sandbox. I need to be able to test that flow, which has got some emails attached to it. So I'm just going to go change this to mike@dataparrot.io. And now every contact email, every case email address that gets copied down into the Sandbox is going to be my address. So in my QA, I fire off that process. It sends out 500 emails. I'm going to get them all, and I'm going to be able to validate everything that I did. So now we also can do encryption fields. This is classic encryption. So this is not Shield platform encryption. DataParrot is completely compatible with Shield platform encryption if you have that enabled. These are classic encryption fields. There's 6 types, and basically they're masks for credit card number, last 4 clear, all characters, a couple of insurance numbers, and SSN. And so what we've done is we've just loaded the mask that's already been defined in the org, and we use that on copy. So for social security number, this is the value that is actually going to be copied into the Sandbox. It's going to be XXX-XX- and then whatever the last 4 digits of the social were in production. So in the same way that the value, the classic encryption value appears on the screen in production to users who are not able to see the original value, that's the value that will get copied into the Sandbox when we copy data across it. So these are all of our masks. You can set up a bunch of different sets of masks. You might have one mask for a group of employees in QA. You might have a different mask for a group of employees that are doing development. You might have another mask for a prototyping environment where you're trying to get business user sign off. You're trying to convince them you've got a compelling case. So the masking ends up being really powerful. The great thing about DataParrot is when we copy a data set to a DataParrot, to a target org, to a Sandbox. Yeah.
The special today is fried taco.
That's really funny. So when you copy data to a Sandbox for the first time, we try and insert, and we track that relationship, we track that cross-reference. So you can copy the same data set the second time, and it runs in update mode. So let's say we copied a data set 2 weeks ago, and we created the data in a Sandbox. We copy it today. Anything that's changed in production of that data set is going to get updated to the Sandbox. The good thing is that also applies to field masking. So let's say I copied my data into Sandbox for first time. I had 10 fields that I was masking. I went in there to review it, and I realized, oh man, I still got one more field that I missed that I need to mask. Just go back to the mask definition, add that field, copy the data set again. Everything's in update mode, and that new field will be obfuscated. So let's go look at how to copy a data set. We started on this before. Here's our target, choose dev. Here's a summary of how many records, what our estimated size is, the API and storage available on the source and target. The copy options, this is what's really important during our copy. So we can inactivate triggers, validation rules, workflow rules, and process builders. So this is actually a metadata retrieval and a metadata deployment to deactivate these objects only for the objects that are in the data set. So we're not going to go deactivate all the triggers across the org, the target org, Sandbox. We're only going to deactivate triggers for objects that are in our data set. We cannot do this for just as any admin. If you can't deactivate a trigger that's in a managed package, DataParrot still obviously can't do that. But all of the other triggers we can. The reason for this, David kind of mentioned this earlier, a lot of times these triggers and validation rules will have already fired. They will have already maybe created a child record. They would have done some validation. So that data, whatever had been created by these triggers has already been included in the data set. So we want to deactivate these, one, to make sure we're not duplicating data on a trigger firing, and two, if the validation's already been fired, we don't need to fire it again in the target sandbox. Process builders, we're going to deactivate all of those. Process builders are very hard to interrogate to say, what are all the objects? You know, we can do updates across many objects in a process builder. So we deactivate everything across the scope in the target org. Fortunately, that's just with an API REST call. It's not a metadata deployment to do that. The options on the right really revolve around my efforts to get as much data into a target environment as possible. And so this is really valuable if you're doing QA and dev and test. So let's say we've got some record types. We created a record type in production, and we removed one of those record types a long time ago. And so there's a record actually that exists in production, and even though record type's enabled, there's no ID in that field. Well, that record type is not going to be able to, that record is not going to be able to be copied into a sandbox. So what we do is we synchronize the record types upfront to make sure that all of the record types in production exist in the target, or in the source exists in the target. We do a deployment on profile visibilities to make sure that those record types are accessible by the system admin profile, which is who the user, the DataParrot user is running as. And then we'll do substitution. So if there's a missing value, or if it's invalid in the target, we'll replace it with a valid value. And the first thing we look for is to see if a default is defined. If it is, we'll use that. If it's not defined, we'll pick the first one in the list. And the goal here is to make sure as much data gets across as possible. Same thing with pick list values. So let's say my pick list values, and I've got red, white, and blue in production, and orange and green in my target sandbox, and it's a required field. Well, red, white, and blue are all invalid, so we're going to remove those. If it's not a required field, we're just going to let it go with an empty value. If it is a required field, then we're going to pick the first one, either the default or the first one, to make sure that record goes in. Same thing with controlled pick list values. This is all, you can unselect all of these so that you can make these fail in the case where they're going to fail, and then you can go back and address your data if you need to. But the goal here was to try to get as much data across as possible. The last one is rebuild data set from source. Let's say we defined this data set a month ago, and it was open cases, and now it's a month later, and we know that those cases are all closed, hopefully, and we've got a bunch of new cases. So we just rebuild that data set today and copy it down, and then we get all of the new open cases from today. Our field masking option here at the bottom, either don't mask the fields or choose from the list that we created on the other configuration page. Here we've got name, phone, and all of these emails. So we go ahead and submit that copy. I did run that before, so we can look at the copy real quick. So this was a copy data set. So it was open cases, and we copied it from production to development. We can look at the log. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that gets logged to the log. The most interesting part is at the bottom. You can see we've done some metadata loads. Here's the fields that we're going to mask. We're looking for triggers and workflows to deactivate if we need to. Here's where we start creating accounts, contacts, brokers, properties. At the end, we've got a summary of here's what we tried to do. These are the objects. Here's the number of records that we attempted. Here's how many failed, and here's how many were skipped. And so the skip part is important. If you try an account and it fails, let's say you didn't disable validation rules and there's a validation rule that failed an account, you know that every record underneath that account is going to fail, and so does DataParrot. We can figure that out. So we're not even going to try it. We'll just list it as skipped, and that way you only have, now you don't have 500 errors to try to sort through and figure out what happened. You just have the one error that happened on account, and as soon as we fix that, we'll go back and retry all the other records that were skipped. Here's where we reactivated some workflows at the end. And you can tell there's a metadata deployment to re-enable triggers, and the job's done. So let's look at the data real quick. Here are my accounts and contacts. Contacts is really the more interesting thing. So this is my production org. You can see we've got our 3 accounts. We've got a handful of contacts. There's some reporting relationships. All of their Salesforce, all of their emails are info@salesforce.com, and all of the emails are pretty much 212-555. When I copy that over to my sandbox, here's what it looks like. You can see the names have been obfuscated. The accounts, all the relationships have been maintained. The phone number has been randomized, and the email has been invalidated. And kind of what I was saying before, if I decided that names were important, I actually do want the names. I can go back, I can change my mask, I can remove first name and last name contact, copy the data set again, and these records will be updated with the correct names this time around. So that gives you a good idea of what the copy looks like. There's one more thing on the job log. We can download the details of the job log into Excel, just like before. This is on a very short log. It's not that helpful on a copy where you've got a lot more operations. It is sort of helpful. And again, it's more of an audit to tell you what actually happened. One more thing I wanted to cover is circular relationships. And so what in my test org here, I've created a circular relationship on account, broker, and account. So what that looks like is if I go into the global media account and my related lists, I've got brokers. So I've got my 3 brokers under here, Jonathan, Michelle, and Victor. If I go to the details of global media, I've got a lead broker. So this is my circular relationship. The account has a child record that is Victor, a broker, but I've also got a lookup field on account that says my lead broker, my #1 broker, the guy who needs to deal with issues when they come in is Victor. And so that creates that circular relationship. DataParrot is aware of those. It defers those updates, just like a manual process would be create the account, then create the contact, then go back and update the contact, or I'm sorry, create the broker, then go back and update the broker back onto the account. We put Victor's name in there. DataParrot takes care of all that. And so if we look at the log real quick, you can see, let me go down here. So we've got a deferred update here and here. And then when we go back to the bottom, we've got our deferred updates are processed. And if we go look at, this is my dev sandbox. If I go look at global media, I can see here's my brokers, Jonathan, Michelle, and Victor. And if I go to the details of that, Victor's the lead broker. So we try to be very, very smart about the order of the objects, the order of record creation in the objects, and also the order of records within the object, if there's an account parent or a reporting relationship in contact or any other custom field. And then we also handle deferred updates for circular relationships on the way out. So that is pretty much DataParrot. I apologize, I've got a lot to show, so I know I was moving quickly. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. There is an SI version. I know there's a handful of folks on the call that work for systems integrators. And basically it's the same product, only on this left column over here, we have another feature enabled. So this top org is the org that DataParrot is installed in. And these orgs over here are customer orgs. And so for an SI, you install DataParrot in your own production org. And as long as you have valid credentials, and we have to enable some things on the back end, but as long as you have valid credentials for your customer, you can log into your org, connect your customer's org, and move data among your customers' orgs. Like you can't move from customer 1 to customer 2, but let's say my first customer is Acme Widgets International. I can log into my own SI production org, connect my Acme Widgets production org, build a data set there, copy it down to their sandbox. And so this not only allows complete remote sandbox administration, but it also gets rid of some of the barriers that we have when, if we have tools that we want to use at a customer that need to be installed in production, then that's a whole process that you've got to go through, whether it's licensing to the customer or getting it through their approval process to get it into their production org. So as an SI, we try to make this as easy as possible to do the same things you would do as a customer, but all sitting in your own org. So are there any questions? Any feedback? I know we've got more than a handful of consultants on the call, and I know a lot of the admins have, hopefully we're addressing some of the problems that you guys have run into, and would love, one of the things we talked about earlier was the UI certification. I'm a server code kind of guy, but I've tried to build a UI that is as easy to sort of point and click. I don't want to have a page with 100 checkboxes on it. And we've tried to design this as easy to use as possible. But any feedback, questions you guys would have would be great.
I'm gonna say, like, a lot of this presentation took me like 5-10 years back as an admin, trying to essentially replicate the same thing with an Access database and a bunch of CSVs and a whole bunch of PTSD. So I wish, like, this is light years beyond that experience. I wish I had known you were a thing then.
Yeah, thank you.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that's amazing.
A couple of features coming up, being able to download the cross-reference. So any cross-reference that you've established as DataParrot has created records between a source and a target, we'll be able to download that cross-reference if you need it to use for other activities. I totally blanked out just now. One of the recent additions is to be able to edit a data set. So let's say I've created this data set, it's open cases, and I want to just add a new rule. I want to add, case type is not equal to problem, and I'm probably still going to get the same 3 cases, but I hit create, and now I've got my original definition, but I've also got a new definition with a refined criteria. And the goal here is, a lot of times we're trying to iterate down to the data set we need, and we're trying to make that relatively easy. One of the things I didn't mention is DataParrot is aware of the source and the target environment. So if you're copying from production to full or production to partial, we know that that's one of the very few cases where the IDs are the same. When you look at the ID of an account in production versus a full copy sandbox, that ID is the same. So when we're running an update, when running a copy between production and full, the first thing we're going to attempt is the update. We're going to assume the record's there. If it's not there, then we're going to try to insert it and track that cross-reference going forward. And so what that allows you to do is, you may have your full sandbox, you've got a quarterly release that's going to be QA'd and go into production there. So you can't actually refresh that full sandbox until you've done your quarterly release in your production. But you can use DataParrot to update sections of production data back to your full copy sandbox. So your QA testing, whatever you're doing, is on more recent data. And I think, David, can you think of any other? I'm focused on the data migration thing right now. I'm trying to think of other roadmap items. One of them is putting some threshold limits on. This is an API-based product, so being able to put a threshold limit on an org. So if you're using the API against production and we get up to 70-80% usage, then DataParrot will just stall and not continue to consume API in a sandbox copy until the threshold gets back down to a reasonable level. The reason for that is we don't want putting data into a sandbox to shut down a production integration with an ERP system or with a website sales system or anything like that. So that one will be pretty key. And that really only comes into effect if you're really copying big data sets around. But David, are there others you can think of?
Yeah. No, I think you've covered the major ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike Troy here. I'm very impressed. I really like it. But one of the things you've done that, is just, I see as very valuable, is the whole concept of refreshing records from A to B. In my instance, it would be production to a sandbox. I mean, that's fantastic. One of the wrinkles I run into in working between sandboxes and production, especially around record types, if I create the record type ID, if I create it in a sandbox, it doesn't necessarily follow the same ID up through the org.
Right.
Can that be addressed, and how did you do it? So
here's the way we only synchronize from the source into the target. So if you're moving from source, if your source is production and you're moving to target, it will create record types that are missing, and we try to match basically on developer names. The first thing we look to do is say, does this record ID, because the record types is one of the objects that gets created when you do a sandbox. Like the record types are just there. Whatever record types exist in production, that is created, just like the user table, just like product. And so we look to see, can we sync, are the IDs there? That's fine. If it's not there, then can we match on developer name? If we can match on developer name, then we're going to build that cross-reference between those IDs and use it. The place where this falls apart is exactly where you're talking about, where you've got a record type that you've created in dev, and we don't have a way to map to that as we're creating records from production to dev.
Yeah.
But if you're going the other way, then we can create that record in production. And the DataParrot, there's kind of another step. There's an administrative step that we have to go through to enable DataParrot to make production a target. The only reason is because most organizations have some sort of change control, or hopefully some very, very well-established change control on processes that go into production. And we don't want to step on anybody's toes. We want to make it very clear that we're opening up a path for data, and specifically things like record types, pick lists, to be moved into production.
Okay, super. Thank you.
I apologize, Tedlo Scalzo. I apologize, Mike. I didn't spin up early in your pitch. Do you address all sandbox types, Pro, Dev Pro, and what about scratch orgs?
So we don't. That's actually one of the things on the feature enhancement list. So we don't have anything for scratch orgs now. What is on the enhancement list is exporting a data set to a JSON file so you can use it when you spin up a scratch org. And I have not, whether it's packaging 2.0 or SFDX, I don't have a whole lot of experience in that. So that's mostly a function of me needing to get up to speed on that. But ideally, we'd get to a place where you would build a data set, export it to JSON, and my understanding is that becomes a feeder for spinning up a scratch org.
Are you looking at being able to take into account org shape before creating that data, and allowing that to help with the data set?
So what do you mean by org shape?
So you can set up, it's more DX stuff that I'm still digging into. So I apologize if my explanation is fuzzy, but my understanding is that what we can do is if we're splitting apart development capacity across multiple developers, we then can provide them with a org, and I'm putting my fingers in the air, making quote marks, an org shape that only gives them a portion of the metadata set that we then also want to mirror with data.
Okay, and so right now the way DataParrot works is if you're trying to copy data in an object in your source org and that object doesn't exist in the target, then we're not going to attempt the copy. If let's say there's a field that is in your source org, you've got a custom field on account, and for some reason that field doesn't exist on account in the target, the sandbox, we're not going to copy. We're only going to attempt to copy data across where the fields exist and are the same. But what that tells me, and this goes to me needing to do more research, is if we're going to export a data set to JSON, then we need to be able to take into account the org shape to limit the objects that would be included in that. Because I think you're exactly right. If you use an org shape to say this developer, this scratch org only has 10 objects in it, if we put a JSON with data in there with data for 15 objects, and that spin up of that scratch org would probably fail. So we would need to take that into account.
Yeah, I'm not 100% clear on that as well. So the other question that I would have is, are you doing any companion work with anybody doing data generation for those things that need to be backfilled into a development type of?
And we aren't at this point, but this is why I wish I don't have my slide handy. So one of the features on the roadmap is basically create data in target org, where you would have the ability to almost define a business rule to say, here's a field that exists in the target. It may or may not exist in the source, but put a value in there, whether or not it exists in the source and whether or not it is populated. So one of the sort of limitations on DataParrot right now is if there's a field that exists in the source and the target and there's no value in the source, then we're obviously not going to try to put a value in the target. So, but what you're suggesting, that need we're aware of, and that's basically creating data in the target, but we're not doing that now.
Okay, I just know that there's some data generation companies out there, and didn't know whether you had partnered with anybody or whether you're going to tackle it yourself.
We're probably going to tackle it ourselves, but we've got a lot on the roadmap right now, and the hardest part of that is sort of UI, like what does that look like? So, but
I
yeah,
thought you said you were a UI expert.
and no. we're taking our best shots.
Just back to the very first part of your question. Yeah, we work with full, partial, Dev Pro, and Dev sandboxes.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much, Dave. If we do need to get over to Mike Troy's presentation here in a minute. If anybody does have any other questions, let us know and we'll definitely get them over to Mike and Dave. Before we get to Mike Troy, I love that these guys turned me on to this site that does the random drawing for us. So when you registered for the meeting, there was a question that there will be a raffle, and we're doing how many? Three,
Yeah.
Great, awesome. Give us your email address and we'll go ahead and raffle off for some Amazon gift cards. So my first time, we're doing this live, but we captured everybody that opted into that. So click to spin. I might be doing this just for fun. Saurav, first time attendee. Congratulations. We will get you connected via email. All right, let's do our next one.
I think this thing's great.
Mackenzie, our presenter in August. Congratulations. And one more. Tim Osborne. So congratulations, everybody. Like I said, we'll get you connected one-on-one via email to claim your gift cards. And so be looking for that sometime here today. So again, Mike and Dave, thank you so much. Local products. Next year, Mike, when you get moved back out here to Kansas City, we highly look forward to you officially joining the group. We'll hold you to that, and
Absolutely.
Where it goes.
I probably will do that sooner than later. And if you guys don't mind, I kind of want to hang around and see Mike's presentation. Is that okay?
Most definitely. Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
excellent. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So next up, we have Mike Troy from Epiq, who, when we asked for speaker bio information, dude, you have lived a solid career. I'm very impressed, and maybe you touch on that a little bit because I think it has a little bit of flavor that only you can put on it. But Mike's going to present on Workbench as one of the admin's best tools in the toolkit, and a lot of stuff that he's using it for. But Mike, go for it, man. Excited.
Thank you, Dale, and thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Workbench, and yeah, they asked for your employment highlights. What's your bio? And my employment highlights are: I work for small companies, I work for big companies. You know, one of my goals, and I think I'm pretty close. I'm a certified admin. I've been on the platform for a little over 10 years. I'm still employed, so I'm betting I am one of the oldest certified admins still employed, because I turned 66 yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Should we sing?
I was, my wife, no, please. I was down in Florida visiting my family in August, and stopped in to buy a shirt at the shirt store. Yeah, and my wife let out that it was my birthday present, and he decided to sing happy birthday. And I was like, yeah, thanks, appreciate it. Let's see if I can share a screen. Other interesting skill sets about me. I have an undergraduate degree And as part of my undergraduate degree, I took a course in computer programming. And the professor says, I will pass you if you never come in the building again. So there you go. And I can tell you that was 45 years ago, and my coding skills have not improved. So I'm retiring the end of this year. I do have, I'm a retread to Kansas City. I was here in the 80s. And in the 80s, I went to UMKC and picked up an MBA. And I generally refer to that as I got second degree burns. So that's enough about me. My wife is here. We moved back from Chicago. We were up there for about 18 years working for Fujifilm. And just in the earlier presentation, we talk about skill sets. Prior to getting onto the Salesforce platform, I did have a pretty good stretch of working with Excel, Excel in VBA, and Excel in SAP Business Warehouse. And getting grounded in Excel and what the formulas can do, I think was pretty important in understanding how the data tables work and how to make Salesforce work. But today we're going to talk about Workbench. And if we get on the right screen, as well as some solutions looking for problems. For instance, I have an activities tab, which I use a lot, and it's an installed package. And Eric Smith, as admins, we should all follow Eric Smith, and I'll get into some of his core actions that I use. But let's get on to the topic at hand, which is I've lost my mouse. Hang on. The Workbench. And the Workbench is one of 5 tools that I think that I see. You know, we have the Data Loader IO, Workbench, Visual Studio Code, and command line interface. And last week with the Dreamforce, I saw a lot of screens of Visual Studio Code. I have tried the trailheads on that. It's quite a learning curve for me. So as an admin, I've used Data Loader for years. I've kind of stayed away from Data Loader IO because of the inherent limitation of 10,000 records a month. But I moved up to Workbench kind of out of necessity. In as much as the computer that the company gave me, I can't load Data Loader on it. So I had a problem, went to the MVP crowd. I said, I can't use Data Loader. And Dale says, we use Workbench. So I use Workbench a lot. I think it does everything that the Workbench can do, the Data Loader can do, Workbench can do, but the Workbench can do more. And I think the names of these products have some significance. Data Loader is a data loader. You get input, you get stuff out, you get stuff in. Workbench does that, but it also has some other features and some tools that just expand on that. So we're going to kind of walk through that. I got a couple of use cases. I want to show you the user interface. I want to show you kind of how easy it is. It's largely, half of what I'm going to show you is largely point and click. There is some features in there that requires a little bit of code, and we'll talk about that. So again, I've used this for flows. I've used this to fix list views. It just has a lot of interesting features about it. I've extracted profile data and compared different profiles. I've had to use to fix a list view where I had a user really help me and change a list view that was, you know, all filtered toward my product or my contacts or my whatever. And he changed it to everything. And it would start to time out when it tried to retrieve all the data. So I used Workbench to extract the list view metadata, change the everything to mine, and then reload it. That might not have been the easy way, but it was a nice learning experience. The easier way would have been gone to a sandbox and change it there and then promoted it with a change set. But, you know, live and learn. So we're going to talk about deleting reports, which is kind of a bugaboo for admins. It's just not that easy. I ran into this as a use case where I was cleaning up fields, and in the opportunity, and you can, you know, you always go, where is this field used? And I kept running across fields that were tied to reports in private folders. And so I said, you know, I got to figure this out. And it turns out that A, you can do this in data loader. B, I use the Workbench because I'm just more comfortable with it. But as a word of warning, if you're going to delete stuff, make a copy, especially with reports. You can make a copy in your Sandbox. They all copy over there. And the beauty of it is if you delete thousands of reports like I have, and somebody comes back later and complains, you can go into the Sandbox, use the Workbench to retrieve them and then migrate them back into production. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of screens of what you're going to see, and then I'm going to go ahead and do it for you as soon as we'll see. Back up. I'm going to want that. So it's point and click from queries to select your object. Yes.
Yeah, Mike, really quick, if you're trying to share your screen, we don't see anything.
Well, that's not good. How long has it been like that?
The whole time.
That's the pits.
That's okay.
It might take a while. That's funny because the blue border showed up. Well, let's try that again. Well, thanks for the heads up. Can you see it now?
No.
That's really odd.
It's just you. I mean, we could do the TED Talk thing.
No, that's not. Let's not do that. That's just kind of fun. All right, let's do this. There I go. And I'm telling you, I hit share screen.
Did you then actually, there's a second click you have to do. Once you say, this is the screen I want to share, you then have to actually hit share again.
Yeah, I'm not getting that menu yet.
Huh.
How many screens you running, Mike?
Two screens. Because it's kind of curious. Can you see it now?
No. Just try sharing.
Yeah, it's user error.
No,
it's user error.
There we go.
Shocking.
Now we
I
got
tell
a
you.
screen.
No worries.
Oh man, that was fun. Okay, so I'm gonna want this just to get you there. User interface. Let's go back up. You know, that's my warning sign. Create a sandbox. Don't lose your stuff. So we're here. Let's just go over to and walk through it. Your SQL query comes up. It's point and click. You just hit next, and these are the delete steps. We'll get to that in a second. But let's go get some data. Tell me you're still logged in. You're not. You just knew that would happen.
All right. Nobody copy his password.
Yeah. One of the things, and we all run into this. We all have our browsers open, our instances open. I like to check, where am I? Because you just never know what org you're in when you get into this stuff. It hates me. Well, this could have been fun. There it is. So here I have to come down and look. So I'm in the sandbox I want to be in. You know, it's just one of those things. If you're going to go looking and deleting, kind of be careful where you're at. So report. Usual stuff. This is no surprise. It's the same thing you see in all the tools. Last run date, name. Do I look nervous at all? Did that ever occur to you?
But we can't see you anymore, Mike, so we don't know.
Yeah, it's the keystrokes that are giving it all away. But I guess what I want you to see is clearly this is point and click. I'm not thinking very hard. And we've got one thing you can get here in Workbench that you cannot get in the data loader is I can run a list view and it will return it for me. And I kind of like that because it gives me an idea of where I'm at. And then I can go bulk CSV and I can query it and it will download it as a CSV file. Again, that's just a nice feature to have compared to data loader. So that's option A. Option B, just like the data loader, we have insert, offset, delete, just for giggles. Let's go delete stuff. By the way, I don't know about you, but I have folders of the SOQL. I just keep them. Like I have exactly, one package, and I just keep updating it as I need it. So that's
not
it.
just you. That is a really good practice.
And this is, pretty simple. And I want to just walk you through this because map the fields and then delete them. So, you as admins, we kind of struggle with how to mass delete reports. It's pretty easy. It's really not hard at all. I want to come back here again and point out one simple thing. Yeah. And that's the wrong one. Let's go here. If I go to where, from report, and there's one little bit of code I can put in there. And that is using scope. And who knew? From report. I mean, who knew? This gets you all the reports that are in private folders. I got to, somebody help me where I missed that typo. All private? All private. There we go. But this is something that, I have been found no other way to get here. But these are in the private folders, which you just can't get to easily. And now I can get them and delete them like mad.
Shut up.
Yeah, who knew?
Oh my God. I'm going to go on
simple.
mute now, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good one.
So, it's kind of fun. Next up, let's go to, we were here. So all, 3 slides, you're gonna get the deck. You add the field, you add the report, CSV file, you map the fields, you click delete, off we go. Next thing I've got is the other half of the Workbench is this thing called packages. And my use case here was, as an admin, before I got here, there's a team that still uses an installed package, but it has not been, their use changed over the years and it hasn't been maintained. So there's a flow sitting out there with 50 plus fields that I kept looking at going, they're not using this. And I'm trying to clean up fields in the opportunity, and there's 50 fields tied up that are not being used. And of course it drives me crazy. So I disabled the flow in January. Didn't hear boo. So now I've got to figure out what fields I'm looking at in terms of both in the opportunity and that related object. And and I know in flow, you can't exactly copy paste that stuff. It just doesn't extract very well. So I learned about packages, and just so you know, they can be a little intimidating and they can be an acquired taste, but no baby seals are harmed. Just so you know. So that's a package. They're XML files. And again, these are comparatively short when I use them. Don't ask me what types, members, name. Don't ask me what that stuff means. All I know is I put my flow name here and it's the flow object, and I can extract all of the information about the flow. Works for flows, works for process builders. It's really cool. It works for reports. I can bring those out. I've had to migrate reports between organizations. You use a flow to grab the report and then upload it into the other org. Let's see, a couple of links to how I learned how to do this. So let's go give that a try, see if we can do it. We're going to navigate to migration and choose retrieve. And we're going to download it. We're going to retrieve it. We're going to download it. Then we're going to look at it. It looks obnoxious, but trust me, it does. It has its value. So let's go retrieve it. Job order flow, XML file. By the way, XML files, you can save those in Notepad as an XML file. I would recommend everybody go get Notepad++. That seems to be the tool of choice, and retrieve.
And I'll take even one step further while this is pulling. I actually am building up a suite of templates in Excel and Google Sheets that then through formula fields extracts out all the parameters and all that kind of stuff to actually get you something human readable on a lot of different XML files.
Yep. Yep. One of the things I tend to do, because I'm an admin, I got kicked out of the computer science school, I don't do this stuff well. I expand all, because if I've screwed it up, it will tell me here. I don't have to download it, but you download a zip file, and the zip file, hang on for a second. The zip file looks like that. It extracts to this. There's my package. And this is the XML file that is what has been retrieved. And I'll save you a little work. It looks like this, which is, frankly, it's nonsense. I don't, again, people understand this and do this for a living. As an admin, I can see I'm close. That's a field name. That's important to me. These are the field names. The question is, how do I get it into a user-friendly format so I can see these are my opportunity fields, these are my job fields. And I throw the whole thing from here into Excel. And this is exactly what you saw in the last screen. It's just sitting there. I go back to, I spent time working with Excel. You use formulas like trim to take out the leading and trailing spaces. Then you start sorting this stuff. And I finally get to all the field names. And there's my field name. And here's where I'm just keeping track of what it does. Okay, last populated. These are my notes that tells me, are they using this field or not? And now I can take actions on. But I couldn't get the field names unless I went through Workbench to get them out of the system. So yeah, trust me, no baby seals are killed, but it does do the job for me. And I can't find another tool to do that. So in a nutshell, that's the high and low level of Workbench. You can do what you can do in Data Loader, insert, update, delete, but you can do these other things. I've extracted profiles and compared them, all the permissions and assignments to that. Just yesterday, I got down a rabbit hole of trying to get an email data from an opportunity team member to a object that's the child of the opportunity. And that's kind of an interesting rabbit hole. But I wanted to see, do those email fields exist already? Just for giggles, I can go into Workbench, pull up the objects, and it displays all the fields, it displays all the pick list values, but I can search for type : email, and it then displays me all the email fields. That was easier in Classic, but to get that level of detail in Lightning is a little challenging. And the Workbench really gets me into those steps. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about the Workbench. I highly recommend, as an admin, you just go try it. Kick it around, kind of get comfortable for it. Again, I think it has some nice features you're not going to get in the Data Loader, and I just recommend you try it. So let's move on to some other fun stuff. I have an Activities tab, and it shows tasks and events, which is not standard out of the box with Salesforce. So there's an install package called from Versatile Capitalist that is free, and it helps me organize my day. So I'm just sharing that with you. Another guy, no, this is one I don't understand at all, but this is one of those, this is, as we all work for employers and they tell you, we want this. And my response is, well, I guess I don't get paid to think. But it's an install package that will display a dynamic related list. So on the account record, we have a Lightning component that shows my open opportunities on the account record in a tab. And I'm going, but I have an opportunity object with a list view that says these are my open opportunities. You know, I just don't get it. I'm just saying it's out there. Just because I don't get it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. So there's one for you, dynamic related list. Maybe there's a good use for it somewhere. Another guy you want to check out is this guy called Eric Smith, and we'll be hearing more from him soon, I hope, from our buddies at the MVP. I have used him a couple of times with flows to navigate to a record component. You download it, you install it as plug and play. My use case was when we have a quick action that will create an account record from a case. And the admins are doing this. And I, as a last step, I use this navigate to record. So the flow runs, it creates the record. The next screen the admin gets is a pop of that account record. So I'm forcing the user to proofread what was just created, because it's not the kind of thing you want to have screw up halfway through. So that was kind of handy for me, navigate to record. The other is show toast. When somebody told me show toast the first time, I had no idea what they're talking about, but that's a pop-up menu that it's a very simple flow. And if you see these pop-up menus show up, they come in green, yellow and red. But the component is just this simple. You drag it in as an action and you complete the fields of what color do you want it in, what do you want it to say, and how long do you want to display it. So, you know, we have a lot of tools in Salesforce that prompt action. This is another one. It's easy to use. You can control the visibility from the Lightning page. But these are just fun tools, just absolutely fun tools that are given to us for free, that are part of this platform and part of this environment that I just, you know, I'm ecstatic to be a part of this whole process, because it is pretty cool. And did you know, you can connect data, you can connect your Salesforce instance to Google. I learned this the hard way. You really want to be careful, because when you go there, you want to manage data security and set up connected ops O authorization. And you want to do that as an admin before anybody else beats you to it, because you could, you know, your users get access to a lot of data in an awful hurry with this tool. So I kind of recommend you get in there and lock this thing down before anybody gets there first. Finally, I got two more maybe. We had a presentation in the first quarter about documentation. And I'm a big fan of documentation. One is as a professional courtesy of the other admins and developers that are in the org, so they can keep up with what you're doing. Second is as a courtesy to myself, so I can remember what the heck I did. But there are other kinds of documentation, and we always get beat upside the head when we don't want it. When the boss comes in and says, "What are you doing?" You know, just what are you doing? And I got ahead of that. I wish I'd done this many years ago. But now in the process builder and flows, anywhere, anytime an action occurs, I create a record. I have an audit trail record. And it's kind of hard to see. I don't know that you can see it. Let's see if I can go here and make it work. How's that? Better or worse? All right, can you see my screen?
We see your
Yes.
screen in presenter preview mode.
Oh, okay. That's sad. That didn't work. Okay. But anyway, I create a record, an audit trail. I capture the action, which is the decision point in the process builder. How many emails were sent? How many fields were updated? Did the approval process start? All the things that we do, I'm documenting it in a record just somewhere. And I tie it to the process name. I tie it to what project was I working on to get me here. So, you know, I do the same thing. I'll run a flow once a week. How many cases did we open and close? All that information just aggregates. And so when the boss asks what's going on, in about 90 days, we can tell him or her, well, we're sending out 1,000 emails a week. We created the workflows, we're managing the workflows, and we will depreciate the workflows. So that, that's been very handy. Another thing this has been really, really handy for is a debug tool for me. When I'm building things in the sandbox and I'm not getting the results I want, I can go to the table and see exactly what fired and what didn't fire. And I've got it down to, all my process builder steps. It also gives me some sense of order of execution based on when the records were created. So again, I'm think about it. Build yourself an object. I call it Salesforce Admin Audit Trail, and have it write down what you're doing. So, for these reasons, I think they're pretty important. Another thing we had, and I bring this up because when it was introduced by the sales executive vice president, we all, everybody says no first, and then they come around to yes. But this naming convention, he wanted it because when he sees a report, he wants to see the same sequence every time of his people. So he had to have a naming convention to do that. And it lasted longer than he did. So it must be a good idea. So his VPs were numbered 1 through 6. Their managers were 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. We just build out the sequence, and then the reps themselves have 3, 3, 5, 3, 3, 8, just so you got some hierarchy. And it does. And then, where is that? That's the first 2 characters of their first name. So it's not a separate field. It's just built into their first name. And it works pretty slick to where you can see every time he opens up the forecast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the people show up in the same sequence every time based on geography or however it should be, as opposed to alphabetical. So that was a pretty good idea that, must be good because it hung around longer than the guy did. I think that's it. It is. That was kind of rushed, but that's my style. Any questions?
That is phenomenal stuff. I'm just going to leave it at that. That is phenomenal stuff.
I got to share it because I'm walking out the door.
It's very good of you to pay it forward.
Absolutely.
Mike, this is Mike Eagan. That was really, really cool. That was a lot of good stuff. Can I add one thing on Workbench that I rely on really heavily, just to show you guys real quick?
Certainly.
And Mike, you may have sort of touched on this. If you're in Workbench and you go, I've got my toolbar in the way here. If you go to REST Explorer, the way it normally comes up is just with this standard services. And if you add in S objects, and then the object name like case, and then describe, this will give you the metadata described in really, really good detail about everything. So here's all the fields, got an immense amount of information on everything. The other thing that's really cool, if you do the raw response, you can get the JSON. So we can grab this, copy it, put it into Notepad. I have a plugin called JS Tool. So I post it here, and if I do Control-Alt-M, it's going to format it as a JSON object. And this makes it super easy to look at, to drill down. This is the metadata for case. This is all of it. And it's a lot more easy to manipulate in Notepad like this as a JSON object than trying to dig through the user interface. So anyway, I just wanted to add that one. That I think probably some of you guys know about this, but it's a very, very easy way. You can do this for any object on the system. Even if it's a managed package, then you would just do namespace and then, whatever the custom object was. So that'll give you a lot of great information about individual objects. And sometimes if you're trying to dig into the details of a field, this is sometimes just faster than going to Object Manager. So.
Well, and so Mike, before you click away from this, can you put in, like, as if you're doing the standard case object again, just because I'm gonna have you click on something, I don't want it to mess up.
Yeah.
So go back to expand out fields.
Yeah.
And then do you have any, what's like that custom field down at the bottom? I know it's managed package, but okay. So
it'll give you, like, for example, if this is a reference to, this is an ID field. And so you can tell the length is ID and the type is TNS ID, the SOAP type. And this gives you a reference to what it actually refers to. And this is the relationship name. And obviously AGF is the namespace. So it gives you a lot of detail about all of these fields. But yeah, it's going to show custom fields. It's going to show anything with a managed package. And then, when you were talking about scopes earlier, here's the supported scopes for case. Everything generic team, mine. So this just really gives you a huge amount of information about the object. And then here's the template URLs if you're going to create a record. Right?
Well,
so.
And so Mike, Troy, I don't remember if you opened your presentation with it or if we were talking about it before we kicked off the meeting, but so like, love the metadata information that you're showing here. An exercise I just had to go through with a client last week actually was if you go to, can you go to info at the top?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. So the info in the top header.
Yeah.
And then metadata types and components.
Yeah.
And then custom field. So this is going back to Mike Troy made a point earlier that there's a lot of tools that do a lot of things and there's a lot of overlap across a lot of those things, but there's some where some of these tools absolutely do their own thing. So like for account, let's look at your account object.
Oh, yeah.
And then, oh, perfect, you have a custom field. So I had to go through an exercise last week for a deployment for a client of what are all of the net new fields that we've created as part of this project. If you go into metadata, like if you go into the custom field metadata type information, there's a created date on that field. I knew that we started this project on June 11th. I was able to take this list, expand it out. And like I said, I have templates that can break some of this stuff down in Excel, but there's every single custom field. And then I could just say, once I'd broken it down, here's all the fields that we created after June 10th, 2021. Here you go, client. Here's all the fields that we've created as part of this project, as opposed to fields that were already in your org. So like Workbench has all the information. Some places there's overlap, some places they're in their own places, but you can get literally any information about your org in Workbench.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Okay, can I share some resources? Because I love that. Okay, I've talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it again. Mike, if you like free stuff, this is for you. All right, are you seeing unofficial SF?
No, not yet.
It's trying.
There you go.
All right, sweet. If you're not on unofficial SF, what are you doing? You're missing out. This is like where they unleash the product guys and let them build a bunch of stuff and put it out there as like sometimes managed, sometimes even unmanaged packages that let you put a bunch of cool stuff in your org that are currently like gaps. Here we are. I just went to unofficialsf.com. They have a whole bunch of stuff that they do, page components, apps and utilities, things like that. I spend a ton of time in the flow section because I'm a Flownatic. Hey, we were just talking about JSON. Look at this, serialize, deserialize. That's cool. As we know, flows can only accept inputs as strings, but sometimes that sucks. And what you really want to do is make REST calls with JSON serialized stuff, but you don't have it quite yet. So what you can do now is you can pass in the object as a string to the flow and then use this nifty flow action that you can install to serialize or deserialize JSON without having to write any Apex. That's pretty cool. Or maybe you want to do things like send better email. That's one that I've used a lot. The send email function inside of Flow sucks. And there is a send better email. There's too many posts about it now, apparently. Where you can do things like, I don't know, create a lightning email template and use it in Flow to send an email, which for a while you couldn't do. Or do mass emails where it bulkifies your email send for you. Or, hey, I want to record the email as an activity on some additional related record on top of recording it on the contact, or all sorts of amazing things that you can do. solutions looking for problems, welcome to Unofficial SF. You could literally just sit here and scroll through these posts forever and find amazing things that you didn't know you could do. I've installed so many flow screen components, like in FSC, they have this cool thing that's like a multi-select checkbox that for a long time wasn't available in standard. I don't know if it is still available in standard, like Sales Cloud, but it's available as a downloadable screen flow component from here, and you just install it, and voila, you can create a really cool multi-select table that lets you pick records and then take action against those records. Really neat. One thing I wanted to really touch on, people were freaking out about it. Somebody in, I think it was in the release readiness for winter 22, somebody made a comment about how, eventually we're going to get rid of workflow rules, and eventually we're going to get rid of process builder, right? And everything's moving to flow and or an orchestrator. And everyone was like, oh my God, when is that going to happen? I can't do that, right? Salesforce will inevitably create migration tools just like they've done in other instances. But if you want to get ahead of the game, there is a convert to flow app that helps you migrate process builder processes and or workflow rules to flow right now. So the older version of the tool only handled workflow rules. It basically installed a flow into your system that as you the admin ran the flow, you selected your existing process builder and it automatically created it, converted it to a record triggered flow. Well, now you can do even more stuff where you can select either flows or process builders, and it takes the process builder, creates the new flow, and you're done. So that way you can start deprecating workflow rules and or process builders now and start getting ahead of the inevitable conversion.
And I'm going to pose a challenge to people, because process builders are technically flows. They are.
Yes.
True fact.
Yeah.
I will challenge anybody who gets comfortable with packaging to use the XML to convert your process builder to flow. You may actually end up saving a lot of time and headache if you can get comfortable with it. I know it feels like an advanced kind of step, but if you can get comfortable with it, you may be able to do some pretty heavy lifting pretty quickly.
True. You can also just install this app and then run it in bulk.
Yeah, but if you want to know how the screws work and everything, you can do that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's like learning. I don't want to learn.
Yeah, learning's overrated.
Hey Dale, when you do that, a lot of the process builders that I need to move also need to be refactored. How easy is it to dig through and refactor?
You're dealing with code. I mean, once you're looking at the XML, you're essentially looking at code. So it's kind of like an impossible question to answer. But definitely something to be thinking about. I mean, we'll go big picture on the whole process builders and workflow rules going away towards flow. Everybody should be thinking about refactoring their automation anyway. Now's a great time to do it.
So what you're saying is the thing that you just suggested is not useful.
Okay, I own this. Go ahead and kick Ted out. No, I mean, it's a very fair point. It is a very, very, very fair point. It all depends on the complexity of what all processes and logic that you have in your org. I mean, I would argue the same thing with the tools that Jeff is showing here that, yeah, you can convert it. It doesn't mean your logic isn't a mess at baseline, that you really should go in and be refactoring anyway. Because if I get stuck in the quicksand, I'm pulling Jeff in with me.
Right. I mean, yeah, if you're going to go through and, take the 20 process builders that you have in the account object and just convert them all to 20 record trigger flows on the object, that's not really helping anything, right?
Exactly.
So,
no, I was just, I
right.
know that it was just one of those things where when creating the record trigger flow, I'm more familiar with flow and how I can use flow than I am with process builder. So going in and refactoring, but I love the idea of converting them into just metadata and XML. So I was just wondering, because I'm working on building flows in VS Code. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, and with this move, I mean, everybody's going to find their own comfortable lane to do whatever they need to do. I don't remember who I was having this conversation with, but yes, there are tools that do certain jobs. Learning what those tools do and don't do, that's definitely one of the things to consider. But the other end of it is, what are you comfortable with your skill sets? Because there's always been a little bit that like devs may think they're better than admins may think they're better than devs because of what they can and can't do, whatever. No, we're all different in the same space. Let's appreciate and compliment what we can and can't do, and let's take advantage of what we know we can do, because ultimately that's going to move the ball forward. But with this push of everything into a flow, I really hope Salesforce puts out some robust education on how to refactor, how to take all the things and get into best practices of one per object and things like that, because they're not doing anybody any good service if they don't cover the foundation of proper development techniques.
Yes. I will say, if you haven't played around in Winter 22 yet, the new like page one screen, the start screen for Flow, really helps drive that point forward. I think they did a much better job in the new Flow Builder, sort of breaking down all of the questions that you should be thinking about before you build your flow, right? And making sure that you have those answers up front. Also, if you haven't checked out Winter 22, we have delete triggers now, which is pretty awesome. If the reason to move to Flow, that's one.
So I know that all the orchestrator training is sitting here in unofficial as well. Yeah. So have you done any?
Because the implication is that there's going to be a cost to orchestrator. We don't know exactly what that is yet. So they're
all you have to do is call them and have it turn it on.
Yes, it is in beta right now, and the beta version is going to be free, but when it moves out of beta, they're going to charge us, and we don't know what. So while it's cool and they definitely want people to try it, and people like us should try it, it may not be something that you want to propose to your clients and or internal customers quite yet, because we don't know how much it's going to cost for which editions.
Who told you that? Just out of sheer curiosity, or is it just an assumption based upon history?
No, it was discussed at Dreamforce and with a couple of the product people, and basically the answer was, the like big picture answer was, we are going through a process. Salesforce is going through a process right now to like really dig into all of their add-ons and figure out how they want to repackage their products. Because as y'all know, right, it's like you buy Sales Cloud Enterprise and then there's a list of add-ons this long that you could or couldn't buy. And they're trying to make it better and more consolidated. And that's probably going to mean increasing base license costs to roll in more of that functionality. But during that, everyone likes to pay more. But during that conversation, somebody brought up Orchestrator, right? It's like, hey, you just announced this cool new thing, but it's inevitably going to be paid. And yes, it's going to be paid, but they don't know for which editions and how much, and per user versus per org and all that stuff. So
transaction volumes, blah blah blah.
Exactly. Right. It's all very up in the air, because what will probably happen, or what was intimated to me or to the group, was there will probably be a free version, and then it's like, if you want this other stuff, you can upgrade, right? So there will be sort of a platform version that will be baked in, but we don't know how fully featured that's going to be, and we don't know what components of the existing beta will be included in the final free version of the product. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, I've been living in the world of transaction volumes and figuring that out for a while.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, as always, just to put a bow on unofficial SF, there's amazing things out here. Some of the stuff that Mike, you showed about, Show Toast is here. Other things that are like no-brainer things, like, hey, when you finish this, update this other record or this other component that's on the page, like, please. That's really helpful, especially when you're using flows embedded. Things like, I use this unlock records one all the time. It was just a super easy way for me to go in and be like, oh yeah, the record's locked and approved, or in the approval process, but we need to make this one little change, right? And it's like training people to recall, and they don't want to recall because they don't want it in the approval process history and all that stuff. So, creating controlled ways to do those updates without having to involve an admin every time is super helpful, right? Maybe even make an additional approval process on top of those flows. So anyway, can't recommend enough to check out Unofficial SF. Go to the Flow tab, the Flow Resources tab, and if you want to do nothing else, you can jump right to the installable screen components and the installable actions and look for cool stuff, because there's also all sorts of cool stuff out there. Anywho, thanks for letting me get on my soapbox about Unofficial SF again, because it's my favorite.
Anytime. We all have our pet toys that Salesforce gives us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are a few minutes past 1 o'clock. Thank you to everyone who stuck with us this far. Especially thank you to Mike and Dave and Mike Troy as well. Amazing, awesome content. We appreciate having you guys do what you do and sharing it with all of us, because whether it's purchasing a tool like DataParrot or Workbench or any of it, we're all growing because of it. So definitely thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for having us. We've been to a bunch of user groups. This is about as engaged and well-run of a user group as I have ever encountered. So you guys should feel very proud of yourselves and very lucky to be. This is a really, really great group. So I will be joining ASAP.
Come on, you know how we do it in Kansas City. Come on, you know how this works. No, we appreciate you very much and excited for you to actually, be here for real here.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Be looking for registration for the next meeting on November 9th. In the meantime, you know where to find me and Jeff and each other. We'll get all of this shared out as soon as possible, either tonight or tomorrow. And hope you all are well and take care. Thank you so much.
Have a lovely.
All right.